people are really losing their minds. Here's just a couple from inside the company. Living the plot of succession is effing exhausting, tweeted one. Okay, let's see. Then there's someone who's a senior financial analyst at Twitter tweeting out many crying memes with little girls crying. This is apparently indicative of his own feelings. Cue the layoffs. Somebody else worried. They think the stock's going to plummet. Another referred to Musk as a moron. But none of that compares to what happened outside the company, Gad, where you have Ben Collins, an NBC newser, saying, for those of you asking, yes, I do think this site can and will change pretty dramatically if Musk gets full control over it. No, there's no immediate replacement. If it gets done early enough, based on the people he's aligned with, yes, it could actually affect midterms. The horror that Twitter will be used to help conservatives and free speech rather than to crack down on those two things, as he clearly admits it has been doing. And I'll give you one more. Joy Reid, MSNBC host, retweeted Ben Collins' thread, and then another thread belonging to an author, Don Winslow, warning about the threat of Elon's ownership, saying, quote, if Musk gets control of Twitter and Zuckerberg has control of Facebook and CNN is under new Republican-backed management, we have a massive problem, and do not listen to anyone who tells you differently. That's what Winslow had said. She retweeted him. They're in full meltdown. So what do they know that we don't know?
Well, they know that anything that someone says that they disagree with is misinformation and disinformation. And so they're not fascist or authoritarian. They're only doing it for your feeble mind. They're only doing it because they need to protect you from those dangerous ideas that are contrary to theirs. By the way, this is the exact same justification that every single authoritarian dictatorship has ever used, right? Even under, for example, we were talking earlier about Islam. In Islam, there's the concept of fitna. Fitna is when you create chaos and mischief in society. So the reason why we need to do horrifying thing XYZ to you is because you're from another religion, or you haven't adopted Islam as the real religion, or you drew a picture of Muhammad, or right. So every single dictatorship always justifies what they do via some sort of compassionate plea to them protecting you, right? So if now Twitter will not be controlled by the bien-pensant, as we say in French, the well-thinking, then other ideas might spread, and we can't have that. And of course, I know that one of the topics that we may or may not get to is Sam Harris and some of his positions. Sam Harris is having a very bad day today, because imagine if now Twitter wouldn't be able to suppress Hunter Biden's laptop stuff, or wouldn't kick out a sitting president of the United States off their platform. That wouldn't be good for a free society. We must not allow Elon Musk to take over for freedom.
I would talk about Sam in 1 second, but I will say the other piece of that problem is the universe is expanding rapidly in terms of what can be said to be in our best interests. You know, what is outside the bounds of decency, and so our betters need to sort of correct it, like there are two sexes, right? Like rigor is important in a classroom, like math is real, you know, like we should have honors societies. And so like all of that is racist. I saw you did a big thing on it and I thought it was really good. But the universe of what's offensive is so big now. And so the freak out over who will be the police, you know, the word police is justified, because these people have been using Twitter and so on to shame us all, to shadow ban people who say things like, we think COVID came from a lab, never mind misstepping on gender or race ideology.
So let's contrast the snowflakes. I hate to use that kind of now popular term of, you know, Twitter, the ones who are all freaking out that Elon Musk is going to take over. And let's contrast this with the following absolutist stance on free speech. Here I stand before you, a Jewish person who escaped execution in Lebanon, and I say this to you on Yom Kippur, the highest holiday in the Jewish faith. I support the right of Holocaust deniers to spew their nonsense. There is nothing more offensive by definition than that, because number one, it's a profoundly documented historical fact. And number two, it involves the wholesale eradication of an entire people on an industrial scale level. So there's nothing that could be more offensive than denying that grotesque reality. But as a defender of freedom of speech, I support the right of these kinds of imbeciles, racists, and pigs to spew whatever nonsense that they want. So when I see people, whether it be Sam Harris or all of the people who are freaking out over Elon Musk, taking the positions that they do, it really angers me because they're not true freedom-loving people, because they are, to use the terms that I think I introduced to you in one of our previous conversations, they are consequentialist in their ethics, right? So Sam Harris basically says, well, it's okay to eradicate the story about Hunter Biden because to not have done so would have led to Donald Trump being potentially elected. So in this case, the consequences were too great. Whereas, of course, if you're deontological in that particular pursuit, you say, no, there are certain foundational values that you could never violate. So you, as a lawyer, would, of course, agree that the tenet of presumption of innocence could never be violated. It can't be under a consequentialist rubric. So all of this nonsense exactly stems from the fact that these people are not true freedom-loving people. They are, in their heart, authoritarian.
You know, that's really interesting. Got me thinking. Process matters. Due process matters. You can't abandon it for an ends justifies the means kind of thing. That's what the founders believed, and our systems worked very well for a long time. And that is sort of, I see your point about Sam, who I like and I've had on the show. Yes. He definitely stepped in it, as he knows. He had to do a whole thing. But I see your point, because what he really did think that the Hunter Biden laptop being suppressed was sort of an ends justifies the means kind of thing, and that Trump is just that big an existential threat to the country. And if you really believe Trump is a Hitler-esque figure, you would share that view. I mean, it would take something that extraordinary for me to say, forget due process, forget all of the principles that we've built the country on. If Hitler's about to take office, we've got to break the rules. We have to. And that's the mindset.
Except, let me give you another example from Jewish history, recent Jewish history. In 1961, the Mossad tracked Adolf Eichmann, one of the butchers of the Nazi regime, and they sent out a Mossad team to Argentina, and they had two choices at that point. They could either execute him very quietly and met out justice, very quietly and leave, and nobody would know anything about what happened. Or they could stick to their deontological principles, whereby even someone as diabolical as Adolf Eichmann deserves his due date in court. So at great personal and diplomatic risk, they whisked him out of Argentina, brought him back to Israel, where he stood trial and then was executed. Mm-hmm. So no one is going to argue that seriously that Donald Trump is a more grotesque figure than Adolf Eichmann, and yet the Israelis stuck to their deontological principles. So maybe Sam Harris needs to go back and read one or two other philosophy books.
One of our sponsors today is Donors Trust, the principled, tax-friendly way to simplify your charitable giving. Cancel culture does not just affect comedians and commentators anymore. It also affects everyday, hardworking Americans. How so? It can derail their charitable giving. Take Jeannie's story, for example. Jeannie did her charitable giving through one of these big national donor-advised fund providers. That is, until, without a clear reason, it refused to send her charitable dollars to a conservative nonprofit. This is happening more and more. Jeannie shares her story this way. I'm a conservative. I believe America's great despite her imperfections, and that capitalism brings great good to society rather than government, she said. Earlier this year, I requested another gift from my donor-advised fund, and it was rejected. Jeannie wanted a donor-advised fund that shares her conservative principles, and she found it in Donors Trust, the oldest and largest donor-advised fund committed to limited government, personal responsibility, and free enterprise. Imagine that. Do you want a principled partner helping you support causes close to your heart, one that's not judging you all the time and imposing their values on your donations? If so, consider opening a donor-advised fund with Donors Trust. For more information on how Donors Trust can help you with your charitable giving, visit donorstrust.org/MK to receive a free copy of their donor prospectus. That's DONORS trust.org/MK. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.